Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to episode 193 of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. It's a privilege to be back with you for another week, and I am enjoying having a podcast and having this opportunity to speak with our people and share information, share ideas, share resources so that we can be edified together, so that we can create better outcomes in our community, so that we can raise the consciousness and raise the bar, raise the expectations of what we deserve and what we are entitled to in our communities. And again, I am your Sister Nora Muhammad, and I'm really excited about this episode. I guess I'm excited every time I have the opportunity to address our people and to say something that is meaningful in whatever capacity that is. I am addressing our people, whether it's in interviews that I've done, shows that I've hosted on the radio, television, interviews. It's just always a very exciting time for me because I just like making a meaningful contribution to the conversation. I like making meaningful contributions into the hearts and minds of our young people. Right now, I'm engaged in a program dealing with our young men, and I'm very, very excited about that. And it's just exciting for me, and I'm so grateful to God for the role that I get to play in my local community, the role I have with my brothers and sisters who are operating out of Chicago with the great organization of Crow and the partnerships that we have. I don't know. I just feel like I'm a very blessed and very fortunate woman. And because of that, I know that it is a responsibility of mine that I share what I believe has given me such good fortune. And so that's why I'm here with you and speaking right now into this microphone. And before we get into the meat of this episode 193, and continue the conversation that I started last week, in which I just talked about the ways in which we must be very careful to our responsibility in the training, the teaching of our young women and of our girls, and making sure that they are edified with information, with skills, with resources, so that they can be successful in whatever their future holds for them. But we know that their future must come from the foundation that we are laying for them right now, not just in what we're doing and creating pathways for them, but in how we are equipping them to navigate and walk along that pathway. But before we get into that, I do want to share, I'm reading this really, really great book, and I have it here with me. The book is called Barracoon. It's spelled Barracoon, Barracoon. It's a New York Times bestselling book by the great author Zora Neal Hurston, and it was published in 2018. And you may say, wait, this sister passed away so many decades ago. How is it that she has a book that's just been published? Well, this book is the subtitle is The Story of the Last, quote, Black Cargo, meaning the last ship that had enslaved Africans on it. And she was able to go down to the South and interview a man who was a captive on a slave ship. He was an African living on the continent, and he was captured and brought to North America as a slave, to be a slave. And this book talks about his life, and it's actually him in his actual words, and how she quoted him is just remarkable. And I'm not going to give much away of the book, but what I will tell you, it is so informative. And when we see the movie Black Panther and the movie that's soon to be coming out starring Viola Davis called Woman King, it really will inform our perspective in what is going to be depicted in that movie. And it has certainly informed my perspective in the movie Black Panther. And it's interesting when I saw trailers for the movie The Woman King that's coming out in some Facebook groups where Black women are having intelligent conversation. Some of the comments were in regards to the movie that's coming out were read this book. And they didn't give too much away, but they just kept saying, in so many different comments, read this book. So I read it, and now I understand why Black women are encouraging other Black women to read the book. And it's really a good book for anyone to read. And I do encourage you, and I encourage you to purchase this book at a bookseller that is a Black bookseller. And we have some in my region, the Delaware Valley in the Northeast. And I would encourage you to purchase this book from LaUnique Bookstore, which is located in Camden, New Jersey, or Uncle Bobby's Bookstore, that's in Philadelphia. There's Ida's Bookshop in Collingswood, New Jersey. There's also Harriet's Bookshop in Philly. And there's another great bookshop in Philly called Amalgam. And I will make sure that I put those booksellers in the show notes, so that if you do decide that you want to purchase this book, then you support Black business owners. So again, this great book, Barracoon, is definitely a book that I'm glad that I've read. And I think that if you read it, you'll be glad that you read it as well. Now, let's get into this conversation for episode 193, specifically following the part one that I did last week in talking about how we have to train and teach our young women and our girls. And last week I touched on two specific topics, grooming and personal care. And I also talked about, man, it's slipping my mind. In that episode, it was grooming and personal care and home and family. Okay. So that was what I talked about in the last episode. And, of course, what I shared there, it wasn't all inclusive, but, I don't want to keep you forever listening. So I wanted to hit some points that I thought were relevant. And of course, as is the nature of evergreen content, we may circle back and expand on some of those things at another time. But for this episode 193, I want to talk about speaking and language, and also education and career. And I have multiple points to share with each subject. And the first I'll talk about is speaking and language. But I'll preface this by saying that I was taught anyway, that it's important, it's critically important that we have an understanding and a mastery of the language that our people were enslaved in. And I am in North America, and so the predominant language here, and that was used by the slave masters in North America, was English. And so it's important that we understand this language, that we have a mastery of it, so that we know and we understand what is said and what is written about us, what is said and is written to us. That way we can clearly express ourselves. We can understand it and we can express it. And we should, and it's silly that I think that this needs to be said to our people, but it does. So I will say it, that we have to stop. We have to quit thinking that being a spoken person means that it's a black person that's acting white, wanting to be white. By us having this kind of mindset, it suggests that being black or being an authentic black person somehow equates with dysfunction and speaking poorly. And, we have hashtag Black excellence, right? We talk about how great it is to be black. And we talk about those of us who are historians or have a knowledge of history. We talk about how we were, great architects, great builders, great scientists, mathematicians, and all of that. And so how can we have been so knowledgeable, and so much so that the European came to our people to learn science, to learn mathematics. And yet when we talk about speaking well and having a mastery of grammar, we would suggest that that's not being black or that's acting white. And so, it's I think that's kind of an immature mindset. And I think that, we've heard those tropes long enough, and it's time for us to divest ourselves and put that down. To be excellent means that you've mastered something. And if we're going to be excellent and we're here in North America, we can also not just be excellent at basketball, at braiding hair, at makeup tutorials. We can also be excellent at speaking and writing and our usage of grammar. So let's get into this speaking and language portion of this show. So I have 5 points that I'm going to share. And the first one is that in order for us to be someone who speaks well, it helps to read. It helps to read. And that could be reading magazines, reading books, reading different kinds of books. Some, read online. It could be listening to books, listening to how people use words and use grammar. So for us to improve our speaking and to become a better speaker, it helps to read. Point number 2, reading is such a benefit because it introduces us to new words, and it introduces us to new word usage, meaning there are different ways that we can use a word. There's different phrases that may have different meanings. And when we read, we find new ways so that our writing or our speaking can grow. Our capacity to speak, our capacity to communicate can grow because we're learning new words and learning new ways to use words. Number 3, when our children, when our young women are in school, when our girls are in school, encourage them to pay attention in grammar school or grammar class and to use correct grammar. I was someone who was raised and I was scolded if I used words improperly. I was trained to not use certain phrases, to not use certain words. And in thinking back, actually just right now while I'm speaking, I can't say that my family that raised me were highly educated. I do recall my mother was a very, very avid reader, and I became an avid reader. And one of my sons was a very, very avid reader in his childhood. But I can't say that any of my family when I was young were highly educated, who were constantly reprimanding me if I used poor word choices. And so I was kind of trained to be thoughtful about the words that I used, especially when they were around. So we should encourage our children to use and write with appropriate grammar. And if we don't know what that is, then maybe that's something that we could explore ourselves as their role models, because it really helps that when we're speaking with our children, Remember, our children learn so much by what they're observing. So it's helpful that when we are speaking with them, that we too are using appropriate word usage, grammar usage, because we want them to know the right way to use words. We want them to know the right way to end sentences. For example, you don't end sentence with a preposition. And you may say, well, what's a preposition? And maybe that's a conversation for another time. But encourage our children when they are in grammar class to pay close attention and make sure they're doing their grammar work. And frankly, as parents, we can learn right alongside our children if we're helping them with homework. And now, with YouTube and Google, there's really not much that we don't have access to in the ways of learning new things. Point number four, make sure we teach our children to code switch, right? Code switching is important. Our young people must understand that casual and informal jargon is not appropriate everywhere. For example, I know some young people, and I was taught not to say ain't, but they say ain't, right? They may say ain't got no. Now, you may not know it. That is not appropriate word usage or grammar usage. However, maybe that's how, your children speak, or, teenagers, adolescents speak when they're with their friends or casually speaking. However, when it's time for a job interview, when it's time to speak publicly at a school program or a church program, some kind of more formal setting, it is time to put down the slang or those colloquialisms that we use in a casual setting. Then it's time to speak more professionally. And I think about if someone was being interviewed over the phone, right? I've done some phone interviews. If someone was being interviewed over the phone and the interviewer can't see that you're in a professional business suit and you have a starched white shirt or white blouse on, and you have on stockings and dress shoes, they may not be able to see that you can dress professionally. So the only representation that you have is the word choice that you use, or the word choice that they use during that interview. And so they should know how to speak in a formal setting, or maybe it's a college interview. It's just so important that they know how to code switch and what code switching is. Point number 5, and this is the final point just in this speaking and language portion. When our young people speak, they should not mumble. They should enunciate, meaning they should pronounce their words clearly. And there's an exercise that I do when I'm working with young people, and it comes right in the beginning, and it gives me an opportunity to assess them, and it gives them an opportunity to receive immediate feedback. And the exercise I do is, as an introduction, everyone says their name. They stand up. Each young person stands up. They say their name, and they may be asked to indicate a hobby or something that they really enjoy doing. And maybe even I'll say, give us a little known fact about you. And so it gives them an opportunity to answer these questions. Now, some are more shy than others. Some are more outgoing than others. Often it gives them the opportunity to show their comfortability with speaking in front of people, speaking in front of new people. It shows their comfortability and their skill set. And so often young people mumble. They mumble. And it may happen more if they're nervous or insecure. And my feedback is, wait a minute, I didn't hear you. Or could you speak up? And I what I say to them is, I asked you a question that nobody knows better than you, your name, right? And it's something that you've known the longest about yourself, your name. When you were an infant, your parents said your name. Before you had an interest, before you had hobbies, you knew your name. Before you knew your address, you knew your name. So that should be the one thing that a young person can say with much confidence is their name. It's what you know best about yourself. And then also, your hobbies. And so, standing tall, relaxed, shoulders back, looking at the speaker and saying their name. And it's interesting because I'm thinking about our young ladies, when they are on social media, when they're doing the latest TikTok, dances, when they're cursing each other out, they have all the boldness in the world. But sometimes you find when it's time to speak, when it matters, they don't have that same boldness. When it's time for them to talk about the chapter of the book that they read for school, that boldness disappears. When it's time for them to speak up in church or at the temple or in the youth organization, they may not have that same boldness. However, we should help them develop the confidence, because they're going to encounter a stage in their life when they are going to have to speak. And even though the goal isn't to make them a public speaker, the goal is to help them be comfortable speaking publicly. So we should identify whether or not our young people are comfortable speaking. And as a parent, you would know this if you're speaking with your children, especially if you're talking to them about what's happening in the world, asking them about school, asking them to tell you about school, asking them to tell you about what they think about the certain issue that is in the news, asking them and hearing how they process, hearing how they enunciate, listening if they mumble. So that interaction that we have with our young people can give us an indication of areas in which they need development with their speaking and language skills. It's so important. These are life skills, functional life skills that our young people should have, especially with our young women. So, it's good for us to have them prepared, because when a young person is not prepared to speak publicly, often they may get into some self-sabotaging behaviors. Or they'll be there, but they'll lack confidence, and we don't want them to lack confidence. I tell young people all the time, it's okay to be nervous. There's nothing wrong with being nervous, but I do not want you to lack confidence that you can accomplish the task when it comes to public speaking. So let's move on to education and career. So if we are going to tell our young people that they should prioritize education because it will help them in their future, then we should hypothetically walk them down the road so that they can have an idea of how the education that they have, the skills, how that's going to inform their future. So, for example, if they say, when I grow up, or, when I'm 30 years old, my goal is to be a nurse, to, drive this kind of car, to live in this kind of house, right? Okay, well, now that you're 12, what do you think it takes for you to be that 30-year-old self, to have the career that you want, for you to have the home that you want, to have the car that you want? What do you think is going to take from you to get there, right? And so much of that deals with the foundation in their education and how they see school and the perspective they have on it as a resource for their future. So I'm going to share 5 or 6 points about this. Number one, education is not just college after high school. Education is also learning trades and learning skills. And as parents, teachers, mentors, coaches, we should not be single focused in pushing college. I've been in some middle schools, and they have college pennants up in the classrooms, up in the hallways. And I think, okay, where's the pennant for the technical school, right? The young person may want to be a mechanic, may want to be a hairstylist, may want to bake, and own a bakery. So where are the pennants that point our young people in the direction of the technical schools? Also, where are the pennants for the 2-year colleges, the commuter schools, right? Sure, you have the HBCUs, that's great. Sure, you have the state colleges, and that's great. But what about the 2-year commuter schools? They are also great options. And then also, in terms of education, we should encourage the non-traditional learning, which is just our young people reading a book. Encourage our young people to read a few books a year. I know with, the smartphones and the tablets and, there's a lot of distractions, but we should encourage our young people to read or watch documentaries so that they can learn about history, learn about technology, right? There's so many different ways that they can gain knowledge. We can gain knowledge. And so, especially when we're thinking about our young women, young women are more likely than not going to be mothers. And if they are going to be mothers and nurturing and raising children, they should be informed so that their children can be informed with what they know. So we should always encourage education, but not be single focused when we're encouraging that education. As we are talking about education and career, number 2, help our young people with job skills. Right? Resume writing, help them send, or you can practice this, sending professional emails, practice job interviewing with our young people. Point number 3, we should advise our young people to advise them how they should conduct themselves at work, meaning avoiding negative behaviors like arriving late, like doing no call, no shows, like excessive call outs, like getting into the work gossip and insubordination. We could also include theft, right? We know a lot of people steal from their jobs. They should not steal from their jobs. And this is something that we should tell them. Do not help yourself, whether you're working at McDonald's and you're taking a couple extra burgers home, or whether you're in the office and you're taking packs of pens home. Don't steal from your job. We should encourage them to engage in positive behaviors at work, like arriving early, applying for promotions, taking trainings, establishing a good relationship with their supervisor, and letting their supervisors know that they're interested in gaining skills and learning more about their field or their trade, asking for guidance from the supervisor, asking how they can advance themselves professionally. There's so much that can be said for networking. And if our young people are ambitious, then we should encourage them to have those conversations when they're working. Point number 4, teach them not to crap where they eat. They should know the human resources codes of conduct. They should understand ethics rules. Be careful about accepting gifts. It can be an ethical issue. And our young people may not understand ethics, but help them understand what's ethical and what's not ethical, and what may appear as something unethical, even if it's not your intention or their intention to be unethical. Encourage them to understand and know policies and procedures so that they don't violate work standards. And they should also know the policies and procedures so that they'll know when other people violate workplace policies, or if they're dignity or their rights are being violated at work. They should know this, and they should know and understand the recourse they should take if any of this occurs. Point number 5. Our young people should understand how they should dress for a job interview. I have taken my sons to job interviews where other young people were interviewing, and these young people arrived in slippers, in tank tops, in undershirts, shorts, jeans that were sagging below their backsides. I've seen girls in sundresses with no bras going for job interviews. So our young people should understand how to dress for a job interview and have the right attire in their closet. And this is something that we must help them with. Some casual shoes, some casual slacks, and a nice button-down top. They should have what they need. Our young ladies should have a nice professional skirt or slacks with a nice little blazer or a blouse. And I may have shared this on this podcast. I was at work and a young woman came in to interview for a clerical position, and she had on fishnet pantyhose. And I just thought that's not appropriate for the workplace. And, my best guess was that she didn't know any better. It appeared that she was doing the best she could to look professional. Fishnets are not professional. And this is something that our young ladies should know. And then the last point that I'll make about education and careers, specifically with our people. And it's so important, I think, that they know that they should use their knowledge, use their skills, use their training to be a benefit to their own people. It's great to have it so that we can function on the job, whether it's a government job, a state job, a city job, a corporate job. It's great that we use what we know to excel in the workplace. It's also important that we use what we have so that it can benefit our people in the circumstances where we need it most. We should not get education, get skills, training, and good jobs just so that we can give all of our talents back. We should take what we know and build up our own people. I think that's something that we don't talk about in the schools. I don't know it's something that parents are talking to their young people about, but we know circumstances in which our people need help, need a lot of help. And, we talk about getting out of the hood, right? And moving to the suburbs. Well, the hood needs people who are educated. The hood needs people who have training. The hood needs people who have resources and networks. So let's not neglect our own, because now we have an opportunity to move up and move out. I like to say, learn, get a good education, get training, get skills, and drop back in to where our people are so that we can be a benefit, and possibly so that the next generation coming behind us doesn't have to start at the beginning because we didn't walk away with them when we got information, knowledge, and training. So, like I said, there's so much that could be added to this list that I have here, and we can talk about that, and I'd be happy for you to share that with me. You can email me at nora@noraspeaks.com, and I'm always interested in your feedback. And before I close out this episode, I want to thank you for all of the support that you give the Nora Speaks podcast. There are so many people that listen, and when they see me, they tell me that they listen, and I'm very grateful. And it's almost a little embarrassing in a way, and it's to be praised on the podcast. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable, although I'm glad that people are listening. I want people to listen. But it's kind of hard to take praise sometimes. And this is a service that I give my community, but I'm so humbled and thankful that you are listening. And I hope that this content is meaningful to you and meaningful to those young people that you come in contact with, especially these last 2 episodes. But, most of what I share here is universal, and it could apply to our young people. It could apply to our elders, and it can apply to us who are right in the middle. And I want to thank you again for all of your support, all of your love. And I encourage you to share this podcast with those who you value if this podcast has value to you. Until next week, I hope that you will stay in peace.
You are too proud. You have your diploma in your education, and you think that you should be white. You are too proud. The white man's education have made you too proud. So proud until you hate your own self and your own kind. I say you need to be re-educated into the knowledge of yourself and your kind now. Learn something about your own black people.
Food for thought with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, norahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@norahspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.